Guys, and welcome back. My name is MrCaproni and this is Probability and Statistics. Today we're going to be creating our own box plot. A lot of people also call this a box and whisker plot. I'm going to take you through the steps and how to create it. It's a great way to visualize our 5-number summary that we've covered in a previous video. It's also a really great way to see outliers in our data set as we see it come before our eyes. As mentioned before, if you have not seen my video on how to find the 5-number summary, you should go ahead and click above right now to go ahead and see that. If you have, then stick with me as we get ready to jump into our first step for creating a box and whisker plot. Now, starting off, you'll see here, our data for today is dealing with a group of test scores I had from a recent exam for my students. The minimum score for that test was a 62%, and the maximum score was a 98%. That's right, because in Mr. Caproni's class, everybody passes. Now, the first step for our box and whisker is to draw a number line that is going to span from at least our minimum to the maximum. So I probably could have went from 60 to 100%, but you'll see that I made mine a bit longer because I want to show you some important aspects of this and keep the same number line through the whole presentation. Now, with that said, once you have a nice looking number line, you're ready to move on to step 2. And step 2 is pretty easy. You just need to draw a line above your number line for the Q1, median, and Q3. Now, if you are doing a vertical number line, then that's fine. You just will put your lines to the side of the graph instead of above it. As you can see here, I went ahead and marked Q1 at 70, median at 81, and our Q3 at 86. With those in there, we can move on to our next step, which is simply to connect those 3 lines to form a box. Now, this is the box of our box and whisker, or our box plot, and it represents the middle 50% of our data. Remember, Q1 and Q3 help separate our data into quartiles, meaning that in front of Q1 is the first 25% of our data, and behind Q3 is the last 25% of the data, meaning that the box in between the two of those are actually the middle 50% of our data. Now, step 4 is where it gets a little tricky. We're going to place imaginary fences on our graph. Now, these aren't just any fences. We have a specific formula for where they're located. The first one's going to be at Q1 minus 1.5 times our IQR. Now, if you don't know what an IQR is, it stands for the interquartile range, and it can be found in another one of my videos as seen above. So if you need to figure out how to find that, go ahead and click up there. But it's pretty simple. It's just our Q3 minus Q1. Now, the second fence on the right-hand side is going to be at Q3 plus the 1.5 times the IQR. Now, why are we creating fences? Well, these fences are going to be used in just a minute to tell us if there are any outliers in our graph. It will help us also draw them visually on the graph. So let's go ahead and do the formula right now in front of our eyes. You can see here at the top, Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR became 70 minus 1.5 times 16, because as seen in blue, 16 is the IQR for this data set. That gave us a fence of 46. Now, our second fence happens at Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR, which, again, after plugging in the numbers, we can see turns out to be 110. So I go ahead and place those fences on my graph. Now, here's where one of two things can happen. Either A, our maximum minimum are going to be within the fences, or they're not. Step 5, if they are within your fences, is just going to be to go ahead and draw a line for the minimum and the maximum as well, and then go ahead and connect those lines to the box. And in that case, we would be done with our box and whisker. I know, what are you thinking? What if they're not within? Well, if they're not within, I went ahead and changed the data so that my new minimum was 45. If that's the case, then you go ahead and place a dot outside the fence. Now, sometimes people use an asterisk or a star instead, but either way, you somehow visually represent that point outside of the fence, but you do not draw it as a line and connect it. Then you move forward by seeing if there are any other points in your data set that would also fall outside of our fences. Now, if there are no other ones, then you can go ahead and move forward, and the next point that is within the fences, you'll go ahead and mark with your line and connect it to your box and whisker plot, just like before. Once you have that all on there, you're done with your box plot. But As a side note, make sure if you do have multiple outliers that you mark each and every one on whichever side they are with either a dot or an asterisk. That way, everyone knows exactly how many points fell outside of your fences. Now, once you have all of that finished, I would suggest removing everything else so we can see the whole product. Here it is, our box and whisker plot in all of its glory. Now, remember, we went ahead and changed the minimum for this example to 45, and you can see that very easily with that yellow dot. You can also see that my IQR, or my middle 50%, is represented with the box in the middle. This is a great tool that shows us very quickly our range, our IQR. You can even see if things are skewed left or skewed right by seeing the lengths of our box plot. I'll cover that a bit more in another video though. So that's going to be it. That's going to be everything. That is our box and whisker plot. So as always, thanks for joining me. Remember, if you learned anything new, go ahead and hit that like button below and subscribe to this channel if you want to keep getting new videos each and every week as they come in. So again, my name's MrCaproni, and I hope you learned something in this edition of Probability and Statistics.